For the next part of our Edward Hopper landscape, we're going to take a little shortcut to make this a little simpler for you. Anything that is man-made and stands up from the ground, is vertical in some way, shape, or form, we are going to use crayon or colored pencil on and add a little value. So in my picture, this means the pole, this pole, the whole fence, the windmills, the barn, the house, they're man-made and they stand up. I know the pavement is man-made, but it's flat on the ground. I know the sidewalk is man-made. It's also pretty flat, so we're going to leave that alone. So the other objects that we're going to use are crayon or colored pencil. And when I say value, well, you had practice with that in 4th grade. So for example, I could just take this barn and color the whole thing flat gray, but where's the fun in that? Because then it looks very boring, and coloring it just one color makes it even flatter. I'd probably want to go a little darker with my value. Take my gray, punch it up a bit. And this one also had some brown color in it, so I can add some streaks of brown here and there to make it look more real. Same thing on the house. Same thing on the poles. All the objects that are man-made and stand up all have some kind of color on them. Even the windmills, I put white on there. On the basketball hoop, the backboard, I put white on there. And on my sidewalk, so I don't lose my lines, I trace my lines, but I'm leaving the rest. Because next we're going to do watercolor, and we're not just painting the black parts black and the green parts green. We're going to make it a little more complex than that. For example, you want to start with the things that are farthest off in the distance, like your sky. And the day we went out, you had to think about, what did the sky look like? So was it an overcast day? Was it a really sunny day and there wasn't a single cloud in the sky? Try to think about what you want it to be. And please remember, the sky goes all the way down to the horizon. And what we're doing on this assignment is making a lot of washes. So if I take my blue paint and put it in my lid in a section that's a little cleaner, and I add some water to it, it's going to thin it out. And so when I paint it on the paper, it's going to be a very, very light color blue. If I can use this, I can go right over all the stuff that I colored with crayon. If something's too light, add a little more color to it and paint. So if you don't like the lightness of the blue in your sky, you can always add a little more. And since I use crayon on my windmills, you can see them. There they are. If something's a little too bold on your paper, use water. Whenever we use watercolor, water is treated like the color white with other paints. If I think that blue is too bold, I'll just go in, thin it out. Keep in mind you have to skip around when you paint with watercolor. I wouldn't want to do my trees next because they're right by the sky that I just painted. I'll end up running and making a big mess, which we wouldn't want to see happen. So I painted the sky, my windmills are showing up. And then I want to skip down to a different area on my page, such as the grass. Yes, we can start out with regular green, but if you look at grass, it's not just green. There's areas that are lighter, areas that are darker. So sure, I can start out with green. I'm trying to leave the gravel alone. And yes, I can paint over all the objects that had crayon. Clean brush, and you can add another color to it here and there. Like I can put a little bit of yellow in certain spots to show where some dead grass might have been. You could take your green and mix a little bit in your lid with some brown. I'll make it slightly darker. If you end up with any big puddles that you don't like, remember you can use your brush like a mop. So you can pinch it off and wipe it across to suck up anything you don't want. The corn and tree leaves are areas where kids are going to have trouble. So I'm going to start out with a basic yellow to show where the corn was. before they started picking it. That plain yellow doesn't really look like corn. So that's where we mix some colors. Back to the paint lid. So I can take some yellow, find a cleanish spot. You can put a little brown in it. You can always put little specks on your painting. That's what Edward Hopper would have done. And this shows that there were plants there. Makes it a little more interesting. For the trees back here, you want to start light and then you go darker, because it's always easier to go to the dark side than it is to make it lighter. So I would paint this tree, let the others, just leave them alone until this one has a chance to dry. Take my green, and like we did earlier, add a little bit of brown to it, make it slightly darker. Add some dark spots. And if anything runs out of your control, mop it with a dry brush. That way it's blotches, but it's controlled blotches. You could also add a little bit of blue to your green, and it would do the same trick and make it look like a tree. And one more trick that's very, very useful. We have gravel on here. I know you don't have gray in your paint set, so you want to take black and make a wash, water it down. And if it's still too dark, more water. Spread it around. And quickly, before it dries, we take salt and sprinkle it on. And it'll soak up some of the watercolor and leave texture behind. We want to see what it leaves behind, not see the salt piled on. And keep in mind, this is art room salt, so we don't eat it. There have been lots and lots of fingers in these cups, and they're not always clean. So be safe, use it on your art, not in your mouth. And here's a finished example from a different day. You can see where I added value to the trash can on each side. I had the reflection for the trees and the grass and the window. Since it was close up, I added some value on the cylinder for the bottom of the windmill. And then in my corn, that time when we painted the corn, it was all standing up. So instead of blotches, I painted vertical lines and layered them with the yellows and the browns so you can see the corn. On the trees, it's a close-up of the evergreens. So I did the green first, and then I put some darker greens on top and layered them so you can clearly see the evergreen branches. And since this was a zoomed in picture, I cropped it a lot when I drew it. I added a little bit of texture to my grass with the salt, and this is what it should look like afterwards. The salt leaves behind little speckles in the paint.